Come with me on a journey to the local shopping mall. I'm travelling through the mall, window shopping, people watching. I move around the corner and then I spot her. A girl, about 5 years old, is at the other end of the hallway. She has spotted me. Our decreasing distance increases her anxiety. At first, I think she is shy. I carry on. But the closer I get, the more she is hiding behind her mum and looking really scared. I move closer, ignoring her and her family, but I can't ignore her fear. She becomes terrified as I move closer. Now, I am feeling sad at seeing her like this, and for her sake, I'm crossed to the other side of the hallway and move quickly past them. Further down, I look back over my shoulder towards the girl and her family. She is watching me, perhaps fearful that I'll come after her. This saddens me more. I smile at her, but it has no effect. I want to go and speak to her parents and tell them, your daughter has nothing to fear. She doesn't need to be scared of me or disabled people. I want to encourage them to broaden their daughter's horizons by having her spend more time with people who are different. Our major theme today is hope. All people are hoping for a better day. We are hoping that one day society will accept difference and fully accept people with disabilities.
Come with me on a different journey. Breakfast is over. I kiss my kids goodbye and my wife. We'll see you tomorrow night. My father's coming with me and we're going to climb Mount Sinai. We get into the nice new van. Better remember to pray. Too late, we've started. I'll do it quietly. 4 hours later, there's a loud bang. The left-hand tyre at the rear of the vehicle has burst. The van careers off the road. There are no seat belts. I remember being so lightweight and thrown up into the air and out. The sand in the Egyptian desert is hard. I can hear the van continue to roll. And I think, my dad's in there. Ah, relief. I can hear voices. Everyone's alive and Dad walks over to me. It's amazing how the Psalms comfort us in these times. I look to the hills. Where does my help come from? Later I find out that God's answer is my dad. He was the one who sheltered me from the sun and gave us water to me. Over the days that followed, there were many more prayers and many more answers. God was there, comforting me as I left a world of action, running, and independence for a world of disability, dependence, and frustration. He answered the prayers of protection prayed before we left and continues to answer with what is needed. I'm truly grateful to the body of Christ for the amazing care, concern and ministry afforded me, for the elders and others who fasted and prayed over me. My most memorable visit, or at least one of them, was of a 98-year-old lady, blind in one eye, profoundly deaf, who visited me in the spinal unit and prayed over me. A truly blessing and humbling experience. Change can be stressful. Lots of change is incredibly stressful. Now, Dr. Martin Sullivan, the researcher here in New Zealand, did some research into spinal cord injuries in the first 2 years, and he's noted they're marked by significant trauma, much of which gets lost in the rush to get someone out of hospital and back into the real world. I'm grateful to the church, NZCMS, our mission agency, and many, many others, some of whom are here, for their care and love and support for our family through this time. But the real hero to me is Anne, my Anne. She ran the guest house that we were operating in Cairo together, and she did it single-handed. She walked the kids to and from preschools, communicated with all and sundry, handled the insurance, looked after visiting parents, packed up all our belongings, flew home with 2 small children from Egypt, moved, packed up our home, sold our house, rented a house that I could get into with a wheelchair, not just into the house but into the toilet and the shower, all in the space of 5 months. Where did she get time to grieve? I was struck reading John's book that the spouse of the disabled is generally the one who has less attention and more to deal with. Many marriages fail within the first year when one becomes profoundly disabled. That Anne and I are still together 5 years later are testament to her commitment, love, faith and loyalty. Her greatest needs have been space to grieve and a little time with me, particularly during the first 4 months when we were apart. She has coped, but she could always have done with more.
Let me tell you some of my story. I'm married to May. We have an 8-year-old son. We live in the great city of Manukau. I was born different, just in case you didn't notice. I was also born cute, and still am. I come from Otago in the South Island, from a small picturesque seaside town called Waiko'iri, just north of Dunedin. I have an older brother and younger sister, both non-disabled. I'm really grateful for the way my parents brought me up, just like my brother, to be independent, to do my best at everything I tried, and to not make excuses because of my disability. I've been mainstreamed throughout my whole education, and this was initially the result of my parents pushing for me to attend our local primary school. I loved primary school. I didn't feel different here. I felt the same as everybody else. I was the same as the others, my friends, and just got on with life. However, high school was different. I came to understand that I was different, thanks to teenage boys pointing that out. Why must we do this? Why do we insist on pointing out difference? Is it to make ourselves feel better? That we are normal? I didn't enjoy my high school years very much. My teenage years were also not helped by well-meaning Christians pointing out to me that I needed to be different. They didn't accept me as I was. Apparently, I needed to be healed. Did I need to be more like them to be accepted? I was confused. I was different. People in the church pointed this out often, through their looks, through their prayers, and through their non-communication. Ultimately, now I look back on that, and it's about value. I was not valued very highly as I was. I changed. I got into wheelchair racing in a big way. And as I got into this and improved, I gained some good results. My value in the eyes of others seemed to increase, along with the increase in acceptance. I was now, even Clulee, wheelchair racer. My whole identity and self-worth got tied up in this single activity. Let me take you back to the shopping mall. I work for Renaissance Group. My role is in staff training. It's a company in the disability sector, support sector. One of the tools we use in training is to take staff down to the mall. We put them in wheelchairs for 1 hour and get them to do certain tasks, but more importantly, to engage with people. Staff finder, understandably, a real eye-opener, quickly realising that people treat them differently simply because they're sitting in a wheelchair. It's a deep learning experience for most of them. They're often appalled at how often they're not spoken to, sometimes not served, both by the public and shop assistants. Again, what it's about, I think it's about value. The lesson is we still have got a long way to go in our communities in accepting difference and valuing all people. Some of our staff participating in this mall experience communicate to me and tell me that they felt like outsiders in a foreign place.
Many of us can recall what it's like to live in a foreign country. The language and culture takes some time to learn, and if you stay longer than a month and embrace the culture and the language and even do your very best to fit in, the reality is that no matter how hard you try, you'll still be different. As a result of the accident, I've been forced into cross-cultural ministry here in New Zealand. It's one thing to travel voluntarily to a country where you face barriers because of your skin and your accent. Quite another when you face barriers because you look different at home. A common aspect of living overseas is the awkward experience of being a minority, living in a world not designed for you, much like refugees must feel. I volunteer at our daughters' schools. They're accessible, at least on the outside, but inside the chairs and the tables are barriers that I can't get around very well. Finding suitable places to live in New Zealand has been a demanding and traumatic and stressful experience. There's a huge shortage of wheelchair-friendly housing in New Zealand. Supermarkets that were once friendly are now difficult to negotiate. I now spend an hour and a half in the toilet each morning, 4 times that of my family. I live in the hope that one day my girls will be teenagers and we'll spend about the same amount of time in the bathroom. Acquiring a disability challenges our life dreams, our purposes and our desires. If you look at the words on the screen, one of them is not like the others. Goodness, truth, disability, justice, wholeness, winning, health, belonging. It's really that disability is not something we aspire towards. It's just not a human facet. We're just not wired to attain self-worth and separation, pain and frustration. Perhaps this is why I struggle to identify with being disabled. Going out to dinner, visiting friends at their homes or workplaces, travelling, camping, picnicking are still wonderful experiences that I can enjoy. They just carry more downsides in terms of the physical effort, the preparation and the unpacking. Going to a concert often means premium seating for wheelchairs, so it's a bit more expensive, but at least it's easier to get a park and to get medical assistance. On the other hand, I used to be a competitive runner, and rain never really bothered me. But now, my wheelchair rims quickly get wet, and my brakes are ineffective for going downhill, especially down ramps. My legs get soaked quickly, I get quite cold, and my circulation's not what it was. So the thought of even getting changed and getting into the shower is just too cumbersome and awkward. So I avoid going out on wet days if I can. It takes longer to get up, to get dressed, and go places, always having to think about my health. And I'm limited in the way that I think about work and what I might do. I'm also not able to go swimming or trampolining. As you can see with my girls, they do both at the same time. It's quite frustrating not to be able to participate with them as a dad. But God's love and His goodness invites us to regard rehabilitation from accidents as worship, as part of our own liturgy, and to treat life in a wheelchair as no barrier to His purposes and mission.
There's a shocking UK statistic that states that 95% of disabled people have never been to someone else's house. From my conversations with people with disabilities in New Zealand, it's the same story here. And very sad to say, no better in the church either. What's this about? I don't know. I don't have the answers. Do people not think highly enough of disabled people to invite around? Do they perceive in inviting those different people that will add no value to their life? Is it the perception that this person has nothing to offer me in return? What would Jesus say to this? Wait, I can hear the words of Luke 14 echoing in my ears. But there are good stories. I'm really grateful for people like Hudson Dean. Soon after joining Titirangi Baptist Church, one of the first Sundays I was there, Hudson approached me and invited me to lunch after church at his place. He thought nothing of the considerable flights of steps at his house, but simply valued me. I accepted. I'm grateful for people like Charles and Joanne Hewlett, who warmly welcomed me into their home group. I felt both accepted and valued. I loved my time spent growing in Christ and in relationships through this small group. How did Jesus interact with disabled people? There's a story that illustrates that in Mark chapter 10. He was visually impaired and therefore unable to work in this society. Bartimaeus was both rejected by society and placed on the margins, literally, on the outskirts of town, forced into begging to sustain himself. He had heard of Jesus, so when Jesus came by, he called out to him. Jesus stopped. Jesus then spoke, "Tell him to come here." An invitation to come and speak. "What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus asked. We could look at this as quite a stupid question. Jesus, knowing this man is blind, asks him what he wants. Why did Jesus ask him that? Jesus honoured Bartimaeus as a person. He valued him. He asked for Bartimaeus' opinion, no one else's. By doing this, Jesus is placing the power and control over his own life back to him. What did the restoration of sight mean for Bartimaeus? It meant an awful lot and accomplished much. He would have been restored to community, restored to his family, restored to work, and restored to the temple. Ultimately, his independence increased greatly, as did his choices in life. To value a person in the same way as Jesus does, it's about a few things. It's about noticing. Jesus saw and noticed Bartimaeus. He also noticed Zacchaeus. It's about stopping. Jesus stopped. He didn't have to. He had a choice to keep walking. Speaking. Jesus spoke to Bartimaeus. A basic ingredient, I think, in valuing a person. We don't speak to those people we don't value. Asking. Jesus asked Bartimaeus direct questions. What do you want? He didn't ask anybody else. Inviting. Jesus invited Bartimaeus to come and speak with him. Or, in Zacchaeus' story, he invited himself to lunch. Maybe disabled people need to do that a bit more often. Let me tell you about Ian from Titirangi Baptist Church. Ian noticed that it was a struggle for me to go up to the servery and get a coffee after church. When I did get my coffee, I couldn't go anywhere, and those of you in wheelchairs will know exactly what I mean. Ian spoke to me one Sunday and said he'd noticed this, and would I like him to get a coffee for me each Sunday and bring it to me? I accepted this gracious offer. He then asked me, how do I like my coffee? He did this week after week, just quietly slipping me a coffee as I chatted with other friends, not interrupting, just here's your coffee, and I'd give him a smile and a nod, and Ian would be on his way. You see, I've come to realise that in church inclusion and in valuing people and valuing disabled people, it's often the small things that make the big difference.
A couple of years ago, I was doing a course on urban mission, and as part of the class, we did field trips to 3 churches that were at the cutting edge of mission in our city. First was in a 2-storey building, which despite its location in a set of shops, had no disability parking. And once in the front door, I was lifted by the missioner with the help of one of my classmates to get up to the 2nd level. It's okay, my cousin came in here last month, and this is how we lifted her up. I've learnt this is an attitude that's not uncommon. People presume that every wheelchair can be treated the same way, that people in them have the same skills or are equally comfortable with being picked up. In the second church, one of the oldest in the city, constructed before ramps, before disability parking, and before accessibility, I remember it had a steep driveway that I couldn't push up. But at least I could get over the small step. However, when it came to going to the church offices, which were in a new building, they were on the 2nd floor, so I had to get lifted up again. The third one we visited was in the city. The available parking for disabilities was full. The steps led into the vestry, and the seats were conveniently arranged so that I couldn't get through. The activities of all 3 churches catered to disabilities, but not mine. Sadly, these are not the only agencies of church and mission that have been unwelcoming to me over the past 4 years. But even more problematic to me, how is it that the cutting edge of mission in a city is less welcoming for people in wheelchairs than our local Buddhist temple? Why is it that we, the church, are not fulfilling God's mission to disabilities? The church is what God has given to the world, that all may belong to his community. My disappointment is small change compared to the lifetime frustration that people like Evan here and Mark Grantham and their friends and families experience with the places and people that make it difficult to not only choose a church, but to belong and stay in one. Why is it that many churches and organisations that espouse Christian values and mission reflect a duality towards disabilities? Those who have a full range of senses and faculties, and those who've got impairments. The language of them and us is not inclusive. Today, let's speak about us, about we, not them. The message of Luke's Gospel is that God welcomes and values humanness in all its forms, suffering, and pain. We, his people, are called to give the unreached a choice regarding which branch of Christ's body to belong to grow with, to proclaim his message. Today is about taking time to reimagine and redefine for ourselves what is the norm for the body of Christ in our worship, our fellowship, hospitality, ministry, and prayer. Children with special needs and people in wheelchairs share a longing for accessibility and materials that are friendly and welcoming. In our humanness, we long to belong, to participate, to serve, to contribute, and to be missed when we're not here. Today we are grateful for some time to explore our understanding of God's response to our brokenness, to consider afresh the invitation he extends to us as people, a diverse community of belonging and hope.
One of the supports we offer through Renaissance is in young disabled people transitioning from school to their next phase of life. It's all too common, though, that young disabled people have never been asked questions about their future. What do you want to do with your life? What are your hopes and dreams? Tell me about those. These are all very normal things to ask people, particularly teenagers, but somehow many teenagers with disabilities miss out. Why? It's in asking people's opinions that we demonstrate value. Why would you bother to ask a question if you didn't really care about the answer? In genuinely asking and in genuinely listening, we get high value. I've realised as a disabled person that my life experience has been different to most people with congenital disabilities. I've been blessed to have people in my life that have asked the big questions, challenged me, provoked me, and then supported me to develop and reach my potential. My self-worth and value was tied up in wheelchair racing, but one day, due to ill health, that was taken from me. I was experiencing back pain and collapsing lungs. I was no longer able to be in the racing chair because of the pain and discomfort it caused. I had severe curvature of the spine. The slide shows a 70-degree curvature. Mine was actually 147 degrees. I had severe curvature of the spine and had to have a major operation to straighten it, where rods were inserted to stabilise the vertebrae. 6 months after this operation, I was experiencing back pain again. The operation had failed, and I would need the same operation again. I spent the next 2 years waiting for this second operation. My family and friends got me through this time and supported me. During the time of waiting, 2 years, long time for a young person, I wrestled with questions of my identity and self-worth. Who am I? What is my life going to count for? I went from being Evan Clulee, wheelchair racer, to Evan Clulee, child of God. I was ultimately stripped to my core identity, a tough learning experience, but one that I had to grasp. I learnt to value myself, not in what I could achieve, but in who I am in Christ. When I came through this experience again, it was my family and friends who asked the big questions and challenged me to set future goals and to get on with life. My encouragement to you is to ask the big questions and to fully respect the answers. Come alongside disabled people, support them to fulfill their own life goals. Be deliberate about putting the power and control back into the hands of disabled people. We're all different, every one of us. God has made us that way. He accepts us as we are. It is time we valued our differences and embraced each other.
Many years ago, I remember a mum with a profoundly disabled daughter or son coming to our church. Sadly, they didn't last long. We weren't ready for them. But we are growing as a church on a journey where one day we will be ready. People in our church have started to tell me that the accident that I had is changing our church and helping us to be better ambassadors of Christ. When I got out of hospital, the church builders enthusiastically built some ramps for my wheelchair to get up the 5 steps. They lasted 2 weeks. I got a new wheelchair. For the following 3 years, I've been dragged up and down those steps. We got a portable ramp, so it became 2 steps. But at our church light party 3 years ago, I remember being inside the church, having been hauled up, and looking out to see this crowd of people who'd been invited from the community. And there I saw Mark Grantham out in the cul-de-sac in his power chair. He couldn't get up to my party inside the church, and I couldn't get out to his party, which was going on all around him. Finally, 6 months ago, a deck and a ramp have gone in. Yahoo! Our community notices that ramp. The parents love it, the kids love it, especially with their skateboards. The playgroup mums love it, putting their buggies inside the church to come into playgroup. And now I've been advised that the church is going to do something about the toilet that I can't get in. And it's going to be made available for someone in a power chair to get in, even with their attendant. Making buildings accessible is just one part of activity that we, God's people, can engage in to embrace His purpose for disabilities. But there are others. We do need to slow down, to affirm the beauty in people that we meet and to value them in learning what gifts they wish to offer. We do need to talk about humanness and suffering. Our church has just had a 3-week series on this, and it's been absolutely fantastic. We've had wonderful discussions about who we are, how we treat each other, how we can better reach our community, and we're talking about respecting God's creation and the differences among us. We've talked too about pain and suffering and our need for healing. Visioning a church that supports leaders with disabilities is something else that we need to do. Julian of Norwich, Joni Erickson, Fanny Crosby, Marva Dorm. It's funny, they're all women. But they all remind us of the capacity for disabilities to confront our humanity. We do need to honour leadership that demonstrates hospitality and a fellowship that is inclusive. And I want to thank Rod and Laidlaw on behalf of Evan and myself, and thank CBM as well for demonstrating a commitment to this. We also need to resource mission to address inequality, to bring rights and choice for people with disabilities, both locally and abroad. I've been involved somewhat in addressing this with our council. It's a big issue and a thankless task, but we need to do it. We need to pray, particularly with each other. We need to ask people with disabilities about their hopes and fears, as Evan's pointed out, about their frustrations and their barriers. But we also need to do something about it. I'm learning that the journey of inclusion for disabilities is not a fast, quick fix. It takes good conversation and determination to build a community that embraces and values. Through my life in a wheelchair, I've also learnt something about God's response to our humanness and mission. And it's grown. My concept of mission now affirms that there are unreached people groups we don't think about. The blind, the lame, the crippled, the deaf, ADHD. The list just gets longer and longer. Disabilities are incredibly diverse, but all have an open invitation to God's family. Yet these groups face significant social and physical barriers to participate in the restoration plan. Mission offers a hope for renewal that extends beyond the forgiveness of sin. Healing by our sovereign surgeon is, for me, a more appealing alternative to placing my trust in medical advances, in stem cells. I remember reading in my hospital bed about the paralytic, now reconciled to God, healed and running and leaping. You're like most paralytics. I don't really worry about running and leaping. I just really want a new bowel and a new bladder. The promise that this condition is temporary is a wonderful hope. Mission advocates with authorities for a better world for people, for signs in public spaces, accessibility for families with toddlers and people with mobility issues, our health services, our education facilities, the transportation, cars, planes, buses, they can all be more inclusive, and they need renewal too. Mission proclaims a gospel that welcomes all people and embraces each person's gift. If I can't participate in a church, then I'm not welcome. Mission builds communities out of people who are frustrated with life, who need friendship and belonging. Mission is with God's people who journey to know Christ better and to do good works that He has called us to do. Disability is no barrier to good works. Mission visions restoring the inequalities that people with disabilities experience. We're called to give. We're called to encourage others to give, to write on behalf of the marginalised, and to partner with agencies like CBM to bring hope where it's needed most.
Let's go back to the shopping mall one more time. It's the same day as the story I began with. I'm still hurt and confused by the experience I've just had with the girl that was terrified by me. I push around a corner of the mall. I spot her. Another girl, similar age, maybe 6 years old. She is standing by the entrance to the ASB bank on her own. My path is taking me past her. Should I carry on? I look at her. She's not looking at me. I carry on. As I get closer to her, I prepare to cross to the other side of the walkway. She looks at me. She looks up at me. Our eyes meet. I hesitate. I think about looking away. Then she smiles. She smiles with her whole face. She is confident and engaging. I smile back. It's easy. We cross paths, and as we do, she speaks first. A very cheery hello, and I say hi back. A simple encounter, so simple. This girl made my day. I wanted to go and tell her parents that their daughter had made my day, and that this had not been a normal experience for me. I wanted to commend them for bringing her up to be confident, but importantly, in fully accepting difference.
Together we've prepared a liturgy based on what we've gone through today and looked at. So if you feel up to it, you can read it with us, but we'll read it together. We are hoping for the day when we can go down to our local mall, be smiled at by most people, be spoken to by some, asked our opinion by others, and be valued and accepted as an equal alongside our non-disabled brothers and sisters. We are hoping for the day when spouses of the disabled grieve no more. The cutting edge of Christian mission embraces all disabilities, and all people are welcome to belong and contribute to the community of God.